Hey guys, what's up? Before I get started with this video, I just want to give a big thank you for everyone for helping me get past to the 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. I really appreciate every single one of you guys who took the time to not only subscribe to my work, but also give my videos a watch, because this has been something I've really loved doing and I want to keep it up more so. And fortunately, I actually do have quite a few plans for videos in this year 2024. So be on the lookout for even more exciting things to come from this channel in the near future. Now with all of that said and done, I figured in the mix of working on some of my bigger videos that I have planned for this year, I decided to maybe do another movie review of a newer movie, since it's been a hot minute since I've reviewed a movie that's new. Yeah, the last one I think I did was Wish, so yeah, overdue for one, and fortunately, I found a good pair of movies to talk about, as, like last year with Oppenheimer, we had another two pair of movies that are complete opposites of one another that led to another big, massive double feature hype in the vein of Oppenheimer. Well, I would be saying that if it wasn't for the fact that their opening weekend box office was so abysmal, but I figure I'll talk about these movies anyway, because I actually do have a decent amount to say about these movies still, and also wanted to give out some good recommendations. So, I'm going to start out by talking about the first of these two movies that I checked out, which is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Furiosa is the prequel to the iconic Mad Max series, this time focusing on the beloved character that made her debut in the legendary Fury Road. If you ask me, this definitely was a major film I was looking forward to this year. Being that the Mad Max movies are films I absolutely adore, some better than others, but I'm always interested to see what this franchise has to offer. Made even further with George Miller himself, the man who created this series, and Happy Feet, is returning to direct once again. He's one of my favorite directors, so naturally his return was going to pique my interest. Now that Furiosa is out, does it live up to the hype that was once set by a movie as perfect as Mad Max Fury Road? Well, I'll say this much. Furiosa does feel like a different movie than Fury Road, for sure. It's not nearly as action-packed, and it does have a bit of a different vibe going for it, being more of an anthology adventure of sort. Yet, this isn't a criticism towards the movie at all, because this direction for Furiosa adds so much to this already incredible world. And when it gets to its Mad Max style ending, it's everything you could have hoped and dreamed for. So yeah, I definitely say this is on par with what you could expect from the genius behind Fury Road and Babe 2. Furiosa is excellent, and the kind of peak cinema you would always hope for every year. It being a prequel to most of the events of this film takes a bit of its time establishing more of its strange world and characters. We get a good sense of how things operate due to this film being heavily involved in the Mad Max lore, more than any other film in this franchise. I know Mad Max isn't always the most consistent, and this does take from Fury Road more than anything else, but it doesn't make this world building any less fascinating. It's especially apparent when you consider that even nearly in his damn 80s, George Miller can bring a film that is visually stunning in every frame. This is a great looking movie, utilizing colors in the best ways akin to how Fury Road did. Not only to highlight this harsh environment, but also to give off the perfect tones to set the mood perfectly. So many great shots throughout the whole thing, and that's not even including the incredible production design that still replicates the look of Fury Road so well. I'm always impressed with this team still managing to bring so much life into this world that's been around for nearly 50 years at this point. Although this doesn't slouch in terms to its story and characters either, as this also does an excellent job giving more layers to the world of Mad Max. In some ways, it's arguably more developed than Fury Road, as that film was more simple in its story at the end of the day. There is a revenge theme with how Furiosa came to be, and who she had conflict prior to her meeting with Max. Yet, the film focuses a lot more on how the world works, but it's showcased through interesting means. It feels a lot more natural this time around, as the film doesn't focus on the stupid explanations for how things came to be, but rather actually give you a good sense of those characters and how they work. Now, seeing Furiosa's past, we not only get a better sense of how she came to be on an emotional level, but it also makes certain parts of Fury Road hit harder than they did in the past. It also helps that Anya Taylor-Joy is pretty incredible in this, and this might be her best performance I've seen her in. While she may not have a whole lot of lines in this according to numerous sources, you don't really notice it that much. This is mainly due to how well she is able to capture these emotions with just her facial expressions, with no dialogue. Miller has some incredible knack of getting actors to perform beautifully with so few words, and this performance by Anya is pure proof of that. Even despite the slight disappointment of Charlize Theron not returning to a role that made her so iconic, Taylor pulls it off so well still, to the point where she actually manages to give off some of the same inflections in her voice that Theron did with the character initially, making her feel naturally like the younger version of Furiosa. Though, don't want to leave out the other big talent of this movie, that being Chris Hemsworth. This is another excellent performance, and another potential career best for Hemsworth. Definitely not used to seeing him portrayed as a bad guy, but he manages to give this character the right amount of classic bad guy feel. He's funny in the most villainous ways, and genuinely threatening when he needs to be. And every moment with him, you can just tell he's having a blast going all out portraying this character. He's the perfect antagonist to root against. And seeing how this story between him and Furiosa goes, it ends up being an immensely satisfying revenge flick. The film never feels dull. When it goes into its story, it's fascinating, but it becomes every bit as high-octane energy when you witness the action in this, that are the kind of moments that show that George Miller hasn't lost his touch. What else can I say about Furiosa than this is an absolute must-see? It's honestly pretty tragic to hear that Furiosa has been strongly underperforming at the box office. I mean, I get that Mad Max isn't the most mainstream franchise, but come on! Even after knowing how amazing Fury Road is, and already knowing how perfect of a director George Miller is, this film deserves way better than what it has been getting. So I highly implore you that this is a film that is a must-see, especially if you love anything from the likes of George Miller and Mad Max related in the past. It's an incredible time. Whether or not it's better than Fury Road, hard to say at the moment, but they complement each other so well in the best of ways without feeling like the exact same movie. This is the kind of movie that is worth taking the drive to witness a stunning masterpiece like this on the big screen. So take that for what it's worth. And I'm gonna give Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, a well-deserved. Excellent stuff. Please check it out if you haven't already. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the other movie that I happened to saw that came out the same weekend of Furiosa, that being Garfield the movie. So another movie that I was kind of curious about is the newest movie based on the iconic cat who hates Mondays. I don't think Garfield needs too much of an introduction, as he's been a recognizable comic strip character for a good number of decades now. I would certainly call myself a fan of this character, not a die-hard one. I've always been more of a Peanuts guy in terms of comic strips, but Garfield was usually pretty entertaining. This new movie did have a bit of an interest, especially when it's the first Garfield movie in quite some time. Instead of being a live-action CGI slop fest from the mid-2000s, it's a CGI animated feature with a promising director attached with Mark Dindal, the guy who did Emperor's New Groove and Cats Don't Dance. So I was hoping for a decent time. Yes, I know he did Chicken Little too, shut up. The only other catch this time is that instead of Bill Murray in this to make the typical connection between him and Lorenzo Music playing as the same character, this time they got the iconic man who got to portray Super Mario on the silver screen, Bob Hoskins.
Have you tried Walla Walla? Cucamonga? I hear Kokomo's very nice this time of the year.
I can't believe they got Bob Hoskins to play Garfield in this. So with all this potential a Garfield animated movie had, I was kind of interested in how this would pan out. With not a whole lot of high expectations, I felt this movie was okay. The new Garfield movie is certainly better than the live action one from the 2000s, even despite this film's shortcomings. It is ultimately a by the numbers animated kids film that does have a fair share of strengths and weaknesses. One of the biggest strengths was that for an animated comedy, there are numerous moments where I felt this worked quite well. The animation strives for a cartoony look, very accurate to the comic. And being from the directors of Emperor's New Groove, it does manage to have that comedic energy that does make it funny at parts. Any gag that works in this movie is usually one that's a result of a quick visual gag that the film managed to keep that energy up fairly well. Plus, the film even manages to mix its art style up a decent amount with some 2D or storyboard style sequences that made this appealing to look at. For being a Garfield movie, I'm glad it set a decent focus on humor that just aims to be a fun time with the characters. However, it aiming for that, while succeeds at points, does lead into an issue where it does sort of become your run-of-the-mill average kids film that has some good morals here and there with the father-son dynamic with Garfield and his dad, but isn't anything too deep. This isn't inherently a bad thing, but even when it strives to be a simple Garfield movie, there's a few aspects that make it fall short of that. For one, its story is a little scatterbrained, as it tries having all these different plot points, and it seems like it detours a bit from the main crutch of Garfield, which is being a bunch of fun gags and little adventures with John, who isn't even in the movie all that much. It's more focused on this typical adventure of the main character reuniting with his parent, which, even though it has its sweet moments, it is something we've seen plenty of time in other animated films. Though the bigger issue this film has when it strives to be more comedic is that there are also a decent amount of gags that don't work. Like I said, the sight gags work pretty well in this, but any joke that has to deal with like a major pop culture reference or some sort of product placement.
You've obviously never been in an Olive Garden that's run out of breadsticks.
That's where it gets a little lame. It has the plaguings of typical cliches you would see in other modern animated movies of this caliber. Though another Hollywood cliche we've been seeing that this movie also suffers from is the celebrity cast. If you can believe it, this was one of the main times I can think of where I don't think the celebrity cast worked that well for the most part. Starting with, well, I guess I have to be serious for one moment. Chris Pratt, sorry, not Bob Hoskins, but man, I wish it was, doesn't really work as Garfield here. I'm not a Chris Pratt hater by any means, and he's done some decent voice work before. Yet, more than any other recent film, this voice feels kind of forced, as Pratt doesn't really do anything to distinguish his voice to match the likes of Lorenzo Music or even Bill Murray. Garfield is supposed to be a rather cynical and sarcastic sort of character, and I don't really buy it with Chris Pratt's voice. Honestly, he was seriously a better Mario than he was Garfield, as it feels like he's in this because of box office appeal.
He's so cool.
Same goes with Samuel L. Jackson, who's also oddly miscast. Don't get me wrong, I love Sam Jackson. You put this motherfucker in any movie and he's bound to be entertaining. Yet, I don't really know why he's here. Of all characters, he's Garfield's dad, which again, that's an incredibly odd choice, especially when you consider that this guy is the father of Chris Pratt. Like, something about these voices don't really match, if you ask me. That's not to say all the voice acting is bad. There are some actors who appear in this that do give decent performances that actually fit the character they're playing. Honestly, the highlight of the whole film character-wise was this bull voiced by Ving Rhames. He actually had some of the best jokes in the whole movie. Maybe if this movie came out 10 years ago and was Mark Dindal's third movie instead of Chicken Little, maybe then we would have gotten the better pick of Bob Hoskins as Garfield, because honestly, it really would have been better than Pratt.
The only thing miraculous I know is that we're still eating while we're going broke.
Yet, in spite of its glaring issues that certain modern animated films have as well, this isn't terrible. I say for kids, it's relatively entertaining, and does have some effort put into some of the humor and animation. Yet, it could use a decent amount of work with a less celebrity-focused cast and a better script overall. It's certainly a better Mark Dindal movie than Chicken Little, but it's far from his best work. For Garfield fans, there's some enjoyment to be made here. But if you're looking for the next big animated hit, I say there's maybe other stuff to prioritize instead. So take that for what it's worth. And I'm gonna give Garfield, the movie, a 6 out of 10. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Furiosa and Garfield the movie. What did you guys think of those movies if you happen to see them? Comment below, let me know, hit that red subscribe button and the bell icon for more notifications on videos, and I will see you guys again in the near future. Later!
Come on in, it's time to party with Garfield and friends. Garfield and friends!
And pay attention, there'll be a test at the end.